Hey Tyler, are you excited to talk about Pixar films?
Absolutely. I'm really excited to talk about all the characters, and even just the films, like the adventures of Andre and Wally B.
Is that the one with Woody the doll and Buzz Lightyear?
No, you don't know the adventures of Andre and Wally B? Come on, it's got like this little bee. It looks really stupid, and 'cause it was like their first short film, and Andre is just this pudgy little character made out of no.
I like Upside Down. Inside Out? I don't even know.
Oh, Inside Out, yes.
As you can
Oh
see,
man.
folks, one of us is much more of a Pixar expert than the other. Tyler has been studying for this podcast for literally his entire life. Um,
That is very true, which is incredible considering that Pixar's first feature film came out in 95, 3 years after I was born.
you were studying it even when they were in pre-production.
Yeah.
You're in a
Yeah.
pre-developmental stage and they're in pre-production and you were studying it somehow.
Yes, no, I absolutely love Pixar films. We've done our podcast on Toy Story, which is just an absolutely incredible trilogy, and then the fourth film. Uh, I have I
Oh,
have strong feelings about Toy Story 4.
and I'm sorry I
Uh,
haven't seen it yet. As soon as I see it, we'll do a podcast on
Sounds good.
it.
But
Yeah. So
yeah,
what
no,
we're going to do today is we're going to I think we almost have to title this Pixar Part 1. We'll get to
yeah.
all of the films, but I imagine that there's going to be a lot of territory that we can still explore after this because I want to try to restrain this to close to an hour in part because we both have been incredibly busy and I'm like
Yes.
we've got to be careful with our time. We have to be judicious with our time here. So
Yeah.
we'll leave them wanting more. Um, but yeah, and we'll get into our sponsor in a minute here. But I apologize. I haven't even introduced the podcast. Hello and welcome to Ignore the Bell. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Tyler.
And like I say, we are talking Pixar for somewhere around an hour today. And we're going to do an overview of the films. But I'm not getting into those obscure short ones, dude. Like,
Yeah, no, that's fine.
have you seen everything that Pixar has produced?
I've seen all their feature films. I have not seen all of their short films. Let me see. I think there's one, two, three, four of their short films that I have not seen, plus some of the feature-related short films, which are spin-offs, if you will, from involving the characters from the feature films. But, uh,
Gotcha.
but yeah, other than that, yep.
Okay. Well, I will try to rein you in as best I can to be like people have no idea what you're talking about. Like you've gotta come back to the mainstream a little bit with Pixar.
Yeah.
But we do have a sponsor for today. So our sponsor for today's podcast is Sully the Monster from Monsters Inc. Sully toilet seat covers. If you've been looking for a good furry toilet seat cover, and let's be honest, who isn't constantly on the search for their next fuzzy toilet seat cover, then what you want to do is you want to get your very own Sully toilet seat cover, or really any monster from the Monsters Inc. universe. What we do
Yeah.
is we take one of the monsters, we don't even kill them, we just start skinning them alive. We flay them of their fur, those adorable, lovely monsters who just want to help children laugh and have a great time, you know, when they're about to fall asleep. All of that, those great monsters, we just we start flaying them, and then you dry it out, and then you throw it on your toilet seat cover. Yeah, Sully toilet seat covers. Buy yours today.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, if you prefer to go with, you don't like to have those types of fibers in your washroom or bathroom, then you can definitely go with the Mike Wazowski version, which is more of like a scaly sort of surface. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very trendy right now, I've heard.
Yes.
And in case you folks are wondering, that there really is this whole fan theory that Sully got skinned because he's got this fear that that's what humans do. Because one of the characters tells him that's what humans do with monsters. They skin them and then they turn them into toilet seat covers. And then in a short film, a short Pixar film, Partysaurus Rex, I believe it is, in the Toy Story universe, then you see the toilet seat cover and it's definitely his fur. So
Yeah.
that's what happened to him.
All right. So I think we are going to get into it now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you enjoy, folks.
Oh man, I wish this discussion could go on forever.
Ignore the bell. We're gonna keep going, people.
All right, we are talking Toy Story. Sorry, we're talking Pixar, including a little bit of Toy Story because we have already done our Toy Story podcast, but we were talking Pixar for the next hour or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So-
there's a lot to cover here.
I know there is. How
we
many
are going
feature
to-
films have they done?
20.
20. Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I did look it up earlier. I've got the list pulled up here.
3 minutes on each film. Go.
Toy Story. What is there to say? Watch our other podcasts.
That's right. There we go. That was easy.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So I guess let's just start at the beginning then. Relative.
We'll go chronological.
Yeah. So obviously we have already done our whole discussion on Toy Story, but A Bug's Life. Now I don't know that I was fully aware that when I first saw A Bug's Life, I don't think I was really aware that they were like created by the same movie studio at the time.
I don't imagine you were aware of that. What were you, like 6?
Yeah, that seems about right. Yep. But yeah, no, it's a fun film, and I feel like it's an often forgotten Pixar film. That it's good, but it doesn't have some of the stronger messages or themes that I think some of the other or that most of the other Pixar films tend to deal with.
Mm. Yeah, I think that may be true. It's been a long time since I've seen A Bug's Life, a very, very long time, but I have seen Ants since then, like more recently. And that was a whole thing that
Yeah.
you had A Bug's Life that came out, and then the movie Ants came out almost at the same time.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're very different films. Like one of them is like A Bug's Life, I find is whimsical and charming and very much a good family movie. And Ants is definitely playing to a more mature audience.
Yeah, which is interesting because Pixar films are known for
Exactly.
their-
And that's just it. And that is the interesting thing, is that in that way, that is certainly what Pixar has become known for, is they are family films, but they can be appreciated, and really they're going to be fully appreciated by adults and not by
Yeah.
children.
Right.
And I think that that's the case with Ants. And I don't know with A Bug's Life because, like I say, it's been so long since I've seen it.
Yeah, no, I mean like there is still that type of not necessarily an existential crisis like we see in Ants, but certainly the main character Flick, then he is struggling to like find his place, where he's like, yeah, I can invent all these awesome things to make it way easier for us to do things, to collect the seeds and everything. And everybody's just like, no, 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 just go collect the seeds, put them here. We'll, give them to the grasshoppers, and everything will go on the way it is. And he's like, well, we can innovate, we can change things. And as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that this is actually very telling of kind of what Pixar must have been doing, must have been thinking. Them feeling like Flick, being like, hey, look, there's a better way to do animation. And
Right.
everybody is like, oh no, let's just stay with the standard, traditional 2D
Yeah.
animated
That's
route.
a great
So,
point. Where there's this, basically a whole theme, a metafictional theme.
Mhm.
within the film, and it's very much like, wow, this is very inside baseball,
Right.
that
Yeah.
that I'm sure people who are at Disney animation studios and then Pixar, then they are both like staring at each other like, oh, is that how it's going to be, huh? We have to adapt. And the other side's like, yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. And everybody else is like, I like the movie with the ant.
Right.
Like no one else is catching this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, it there is, I think, a lot to pick apart with A Bug's Life. But overall it is, um I think understandably so, a relatively forgotten Pixar film. Um just because it doesn't resonate with most people, I think.
I agree. Yeah, I think that is it, and I'm not quite sure why that is, because I it's not even so much that they're insects, because if you look at Toy Story, I mean they're toys.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you look at the vast majority of Pixar films, they involve uh, creatures, non-human characters existing in a world where humans exist.
Right.
Um, which I thought was always, one of the things that separated Pixar films from a lot of other films, until you get to Cars, in which case then everything just gets thrown out the window. Um,
Right.
but but yeah, so it is. I'm not quite sure why it is either, and it really is. I don't know. A Bug's Life is interesting because it came out uh, 3 years after Toy Story and a year before Toy Story 2. So it's right in between the two. And
Yeah.
then I think that after Toy Story 2, everybody just kind of, thought of Pixar as, oh yeah, they're the guys who did Toy Story. And I think they did something else too.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how it went for the next, for the, I mean, honestly, that's kind of still what they're thought of as,
Right.
but yeah.
All right. So we've got Toy Story that came out in 1995. A Bug's Life was 1998. Toy Story 2, 1999. And then 2 years later, this is quite the departure in a lot of ways. And you get Monsters Inc.
Yeah, yeah. Imagine trying to pitch this idea to Hollywood. Okay, yeah, so we're going to be following the monsters who scare children before they go to sleep.
Right.
Um, and they're going to be the heroes, the protagonists of this story, and they are scared of children.
That's right. That's right.
It's brilliant, but it's also like, before that last little bit, then it just seems like, oh, well, that isn't the best idea. And then you say, wait, they're afraid of children. What do you mean they're afraid of children?
Right.
And that is an incredible little twist
Yeah.
on the story. Everybody fell in love with Sully, with Mike Wazowski.
Yeah.
And with Boo, the little girl in it.
Right.
Uh, Everybody's heart melted with as they saw how much Boo meant to Sully. It is an incredible film. Still.
It really is. And it does what Pixar does so well, which is that you are going to experience the full gamut of human emotions within the film. And
Yeah.
it is legitimately a film that will make you laugh and will tug at your heartstrings. I don't want to say will make you cry, because that really depends on the person, but it'll make you feel like crying at times.
Yeah.
It's got these great moments of sentimentality, while at the same time having these amazing comedic moments and a fairly, compelling plot where you're, looking for this resolution to the plot, where there are stakes involved in this, because the
Hmm.
entire monster universe is caught up in their relationship with the human world, and specifically with children and all of that. You're like, oh, that's incredible. So you've got a great script, a great plot, you've got heart, you've got comedy, and it's going to appeal to every age imaginable. And,
Yeah,
and so then you're just like, yeah, that kind of seems like the perfect movie.
right. Yeah,
Like I'm saying, like from a business standpoint, then it's certainly the perfect movie
yeah,
because it's going to do nothing except for make money.
yeah. Absolutely, it appeals to all demographics. It's got something for everyone.
And it's satisfying. People
Yeah,
don't feel like when they go and see it that they have been shortchanged in some way.
right.
They get what they
Yeah,
pay for, like, and I think most people are like, that was well worth my time.
yeah. Absolutely. I would also just like to mention that like they had to create so many different characters for this
Yeah,
film. They built an entire world of monsters and using, computer animation,
right.
which is so time consuming. I've seen, some of the special features and stuff, and one of the things that took them forever to get right was the main character, Sully, his fur.
Mm,
Like to get it to move properly took
yeah,
them forever because it kept stretching when it wasn't supposed to stretch and just moving like the wrong way. If they made it too long, then it looked too uh I don't know, then he looked too baggy, if you will.
right. Yeah. More of a
Yeah, it
shag
was.
carpet than a toilet seat cover.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that was it's fascinating to look at that sort of stuff and to see the just the incredible variety of monsters that they were able to create. Because you've got this
Yeah,
one-eyed reptilian, creature with tiny little horns.
yeah,
Um, then you've got, this big bear-looking,
yeah,
creature. You've got a spider creature with,
right.
with with Mr. Waternoose. Um, you've got a chameleon. You've got, it just keeps going, and they know from the moment that they started working on this, and they had to have known like that they needed to take full advantage of it and show people as many different varieties of creatures as they possibly could. I mean, you have that incredible sequence toward the beginning of the film where they're just walking down the street and like they're like reading the paper and it's like baby born with 5 heads, parents thrilled, and
Right,
like
right.
stuff like that. They're like throwing around these weird looking fruits, I think. Like this produce. You've got the jelly monster that just falls right through the sewer grate. You've got them walk up to Ted, who's got like dinosaur legs but sounds like a chicken. Hey, hey Ted, good morning.
Right.
um, yeah, they clearly had a lot of fun creating
Yeah.
all those characters, but that's something that you could have completely omitted that entire scene, and the film would still be the same in terms of plot, but the world wouldn't feel as true,
Right.
as fully realized.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it doesn't feel like you're only looking at um, a set where the second you peer beyond that building, it's just going to be just this blank nothingness. Where it's like
Right.
that world building. It feels um, so complete that everywhere you look, there's more detail, and you can imagine that if and it's not a camera, but if the camera panned a certain way, that you would just see more and more and more, that it's
Right.
just continues to exist there. It's not like the simulation games from the 90s and early 2000s like Sim City, where it's just like boom, and then you get into the abyss. Everything beyond
Right.
that is just the nothingness, but it doesn't feel
Yeah.
that way when you're watching it.
Yeah, and I mean even in regards or in comparison to Pixar's other films at that point, A Bug's Life very much takes place on, I think it's called Ant Island, with just a small excursion to the circus area, which is the big city.
Right.
Um, and even Toy Story to some degree, but it does branch off a little bit more, but you've got Andy's room, you've got Sid's backyard, Sid's
Yeah.
house. That's the majority of it, and Pizza Planet.
Right.
you don't really get a lot more than that. And if you look at those films, then you do kind of see that it's like, oh, well, there's not, they clearly just built what they needed and,
Yes.
you know, duplicated houses and
Right.
everything like that. But then you look at the city of Monstropolis and you're like, oh my
Right.
goodness, that's a full city. Like, you know, you go to Harryhausen's, you've got the entire, you know, Monsters Inc., Monsters Incorporated factory.
Right.
You see so much of that world, and then you go through doors, visiting all sorts of different places.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
it is truly incredible.
Yeah, it really is. Um, yeah, that's absolutely it. It's now the other thing I wanted to say with Monsters Inc. before we move on is that I think it has got one of the funniest moments of trauma to the groin since Sideshow Bob from The Simpsons. That is my
Yeah.
favorite moment from the film of Mike Wazowski just like on that sewer grate. And doesn't that happen to Sideshow Bob? Isn't it like the exact same sequence?
Yeah, yes, he with Sideshow Bob, he falls off of the side of
The
the
dam?
Springfield Dam. Yeah, and he lands on one of the pipes.
Yeah.
Uh, but with Mike, that like he intentionally does it, landing
Oh,
on
right.
on this
Right.
bar, holding the doors, right? Like
Right.
he just lands right on the bar and just looks up over at Boo, trying to see her reaction, and and then Sully's just like, "Oh, I'm sorry, her hood was down. Can you do it again?"
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a great moment. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's slapstick, but it knows that it's slapstick. It's intentional slapstick where it's not, you know, like, oh yeah, here's a funny part where the guy got hurt. It's, well, there's a reason why he would
Yes.
intentionally do that. Uh,
Yes.
Not to pick apart the scene too much, but
No, I think that I think that it deserves to be picked apart like that. Because that is, I think, why the comedy works so well there.
yeah, yeah. Even Monsters Inc. also has one of our mom's favorite moments in I think any film, or certainly funniest, which is toward the beginning of the film when Mike is challenging Sully, and one of the things that he does is he says, you know, like, okay, how about this kind of scare? How about that kind of scare? Twins and a bunk bed. And Sully goes, "Arr, arr, arr, arr."
Right. Right.
Oh, I thought I had you there. And every single time that that comes up, then our mom just like dies laughing. Like, mommy, she loves that moment, and that's really telling that it is such a funny film, despite you know it being so heartwarming
Yeah.
and honestly frightening at times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Certainly for
And
children.
absolutely. And they did such a great job in voice casting as well, right? Because when you hear John Goodman's voice, you know what he looks like. Um,
Right.
for most people, then they know what John Goodman looks like, and then they know what Billy Crystal looks like. And they know that if you stood those two guys next to each other, one of them is going to look a whole lot bigger than the other guy. And so,
Right.
so I'm saying, as far as the monsters, that I'm like, I think there's something in us where we're like Billy Crystal's voice with this little like monster, and then John Goodman, who's just this big guy. It's
Yeah.
it's a great choice.
Yeah, and I do think that we talked about this in the Toy Story podcast, but I'll bring it up again. Billy Crystal was originally approached to play Buzz Lightyear when they were casting for
Hmm.
the original Toy Story, which would have been so weird.
Yeah, he doesn't have that, tough guy
Spaceman.
voice. Yeah, he doesn't have a spaceman voice. No.
No. So he turned it down. Once he saw how successful the film was, he instantly regretted his decision. And then when
Hmm.
Pixar came back and was like, "Hey, we're doing this other film called Monsters Inc. We're considering you for one of the roles," he jumped on it right away.
Right.
He like didn't even look at the script. He was just like, "Yes, for sure, because I made a mistake last time. I'm not going to make the same mistake
That's
twice."
interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, really incredible casting choices there, but it's yeah, that's Monsters Inc.
Right. So the next film, Finding Nemo,
Mhm.
2003. I mean, Finding Nemo is they've definitely established themselves by this point. Pixar has established
Yeah.
themselves, and the choice of characters, I think, is spectacular in Finding
Mhm.
Nemo, where it's similar to Monsters Inc. or A Bug's Life or Toy Story in that you're not dealing with human protagonists in this film.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I've got thoughts on it, but I don't know if you wanted to get started.
Yeah, I will say Finding Nemo is probably not one of my favorite Pixar films, and it's a great film. All Pixar films, in my opinion, are great with a few exceptions, but it's not one of my favorites, and I think it just, for whatever reason, doesn't really resonate with me that well. But yeah, I mean, the choice to have a large reason for why they kept using non-human characters was because they knew that human characters are the hardest to do,
Right.
where you reach that point of the uncanny valley where it just looks off if it's even the slightest bit wrong, where you're just
Yeah.
like, I don't know what I'm looking at. So they just completely avoided that. And going with fish.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of another, I don't know. Like there are certainly other stories that feature fish, but I feel like they're an often neglected um, choice for children's characters. Um,
Yeah, I mean, so much of it, I mean, SpongeBob SquarePants certainly has figured out a way to
that's true.
do this. But I feel like that's the problem though, and I feel like that's everybody's issue with Aquaman, right? Then it's like,
Right.
what do you mean it's all underwater? Number one, I don't have any experience underwater. So I don't even know what these things look like. I don't know what their day-to-day life is. I've never seen a fish do a funny thing because I'm not looking at them. Right? It's like
Right.
if you take any other kind of animal, whether it's a rodent or some kind of canine or feline or whatever, it's like, well, we see them all the time. We
Yeah.
see squirrels or we see birds, we see dogs and cats and all of that. And we're like, yeah, they're cute and they're fun. But it's like, what does a baby fish look like? I don't
A
know.
smaller fish?
Right. We all know what a puppy looks like or a kitten.
Right.
But do we know what yeah, a baby fish looks like? And then Pixar is
Yeah.
like, here you go. This is what it looks like. And we're
Right.
like,
Yeah. I
okay.
mean, even the baby or the child octopus was fascinating to see. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, so it just has these little stub legs. Like, I guess that
right,
makes sense, but it looks so weird.
right. I do like, I really enjoy Finding Nemo. And what I enjoy so much about the film, I think, is how it's tackling pretty heavy themes. And it is it is still funny, but I would say the balance within the film is more, sentimentality or sentimental and heavy and serious and less
Mhm.
comedy. That
Yeah.
in
Yeah. And even
comparison to like Monsters Inc. or even Toy Story, then I think this one's a little bit down here and the other ones are a little bit balanced the other way.
yes, yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that even the humor that it does have is for the most part more it appeals more to children. You've got, when the tank gets all dirty, and then you've got, belching and fart jokes that are happening in there. And even just Dory as a character, for the most part, is just played for laughs. Like, oh, look at her, she's so forgetful. But as an
Right.
adult, then I watch it and I go like, well, that's not really funny. Like, that's just sad that, I can't imagine what it's like to live a life like that. So,
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like they're taking really heavy, dark topics, and then they're just like, ha!
right.
Isn't that funny? This woman has got brain damage. Like, isn't that great? And you're like, oh yeah, like permanent memory loss, and that it's a nightmare scenario, right?
Yeah.
Being a prisoner of your own mind, where it's you can't trust anything or anyone, and it's just she's constantly caught in this loop of
Right.
eternally in the present and eternally confused. Uh, but then they definitely play it for laughs, and it's interesting. But the other part too that I think is interesting is that it I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, but does the film not start, or at least very early on, with the death of Nemo's mother? And I
Yes.
was just trying to double check on the plot, and then I guess like and a bunch of the eggs as well. And so you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it was. I forget how many eggs it is because they do like say, and it's, something like 50 or 100 or I don't even remember how many eggs, but because the mother jokes like, oh, there are this many, I'm sure at least one of them will like you. And then, because, Marlin, Nemo's father, is worried about that,
right.
as as I think is I don't have any experience personally, but as I imagine is a common worry of, future fathers of just like, well, what if they don't like me?
Mm.
Um, what if, my kid doesn't like me or
I can't imagine a person not liking me. Just, I can't even, my mind can't even go there. It's unfathomable.
Oh man. But yeah, so so Marlin has that fear, and then all but one of the eggs is destroyed or eaten or you know whatever it may be.
Yeah,
And even the one that is left is damaged.
right.
Um, and that's why Nemo has his little fin.
Right. So you've got multiple disabled characters within the film. And then
Mhm.
what's really at the heart of the, like, what's propelling his father to go after him is this whole thing of everyone I know and love is gone except for this little guy. And
Right.
I, I've got just a tiny little theory here. I just want to verify something first, but um, like I say, you're dealing with really heavy themes,
Absolutely.
and yeah, I'm gonna just go ahead and say it that I'm trying to double check, but it's Albert Brooks who, yeah, it's Albert Brooks who does the voice of Nemo's father,
Okay.
and and he's Jewish, and he's certainly the like the vocal speech patterns within the film, like it's a lot of, yeah, that's a Jewish guy speaking.
Mm,
You know what I mean? And there's a
interesting.
lot of, you can hear it that there's a lot of like the cadence to his expression. It's very much this Jewish guy who's raising his kid. And anyway, my point here is that I think it's very hard to hear that and not think of this Jewish guy who is raising this kid. And if you think about this, you're like, okay, and what's the plot of this? Oh, this monster came in and just annihilated his entire
Ooh,
family. Right? That
wow. Yeah.
I think there's something there. And just as we're talking, that I'm working through this idea. But I'd be very curious if anybody has actually explored Holocaust themes through Finding Nemo. And that might
Hmm.
sound absurd, but I'm being quite serious. I really do think that there's something to that. Where you've
Yeah.
got, because
Yeah.
what else is that except for genocide? Right? At
Right.
least for that particular family, than having the entire family wiped out by this unstoppable monster that just on a whim does it.
Wow. Yeah, you've opened up a whole new world for me, and now I feel like I need to rewatch Finding Nemo. And
Yeah, I'd like to rewatch it thinking through that theme, because
mhm,
I think you could do a really interesting analysis of it. Uh, like I say, that's what I like about Finding Nemo. I don't know
mhm.
that necessarily. I think for myself as a kid, because at times, I was a fairly brooding child. So I think that I would probably like the film because it's fairly heavy. But I
Mm.
imagine there's a lot of kids who are like, man, this thing's a downer.
Right.
Right? Because
Yeah.
it's not really, it doesn't have slapstick, and it doesn't, like I say, it tends to be a lot more on the overall weighting of which one's more important than it seems to be. These heavy themes seem to be more important than in the other Pixar films that we've seen up to this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it also has a lot of like it has a number of references to to things that kids will not pick up on, such as the name of the shark is Bruce, which is, what they nicknamed the shark during the filming of Jaws.
Mm.
Um, and they even have one point where he's chasing them through the sunken submarine, and he crashes into a wall, so it's just his head that's coming through, and he goes, "Here's Brucey," which is, a reference to The Shining. It's a lot of stuff like that that I think is mostly lost on children, but children are, they love the hilarity of Dory and all the characters in the tank. So it keeps
Hmm.
them watching.
Right.
Um, yeah. So I definitely do think that, like, it is a stunning film. And the fact that it's not, one of my personal favorites is not a knock against it in any way. I do think that it is an incredible film, but it's just, in my own, it, it's not a film that I regularly go, oh man, I really want to rewatch that again. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? So,
Yes, I do. I think because it it's not that it's not a satisfying film, but I think it lasts a little bit more than the other ones.
mm, yeah. Um, yeah.
Uh, I'm just doing a quick search here, and there are some people who have done, like, I don't think it's any formal academic research, but there are some people who have made those, have asked that question, right? Is Finding Nemo a Jewish story, for instance? Um, and I mean, because I guess what I'm saying is, if you think about that theme, or that plot element of I've lost my entire family and all these people who are important to me, and then having to go and travel and go to this place that I've never been before after going through one of the worst tragedies a human being can possibly go through, right? Because for so many European Jews, and that's what they were experiencing. Like, if they survived the actual Holocaust and were liberated from these concentration camps, and so many of them traveled to other parts of the world, and specifically to, many of them to North America. And
Right.
it's, is that seems to be a pretty important thing that's happening within the film, is this journey, right?
Right.
After
Yeah.
the entire family being decimated, and this person who's just, uh, constantly worrying, and he's got good reason to worry.
Right.
He knows that the
Yeah.
world is a dangerous place, or at least the ocean is a dangerous place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's it's interesting because I mean, not to get too much into the historical uh, nature or possible interpretations of this film, but you can also look to Old Testament uh, Jews where
Yeah.
when they're leaving Egypt
Yeah,
and
absolutely. The Jewish the Jewish, or really, like, it would be the ancient Israelite exodus out of Egypt. And
mhm.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's interesting. I really do think that there's something to it, because I
yeah,
don't think it's insignificant that they have Albert Brooks doing the voice. And like I say, it's been so long since I've watched it, but I think it's a cadence more than anything, of you hear it and you just think of these established Jewish characters, that it's like, you're just like, yeah, that's a Jewish dad who's talking. Right.
thinking about it now, it's funny because Marlin, he's a clownfish, and people are like, "Oh, you're a clownfish, so you must be really funny, right?" And he's like, "Oh no, I'm actually not really that funny." And it's there is, of course, the
People do that with
stereotype
Jewish
of
people.
yeah
Yeah,
of
because so
Jewish
many
people
comedy
like
writers historically have been Jewish.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
happens all the time, is you say, oh, you're Jewish, you must be funny, right?
right.
And I think that a lot of funny Jewish people will then respond, and, like, oh, I'm not actually that funny. The reason why people laugh is because, and they've got their little, like, thing
Right,
within that of, no, I'm going to downplay it, I'm not funny, and then they get a good joke out of it.
right. Yeah.
Because that's a whole
Um,
history of Hollywood, is Jewish comedy writing.
Right.
specifically by Jewish people and it coming out of Judaism. I don't know enough about it, but I know that there's plenty of research on that whole thing that
Mm,
apparently, and from what I've heard, so much of what we consider to be good comedy is very much Jewish comedy.
right. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole history to it within Hollywood that I don't, and I'm just not familiar enough with it. I know that it exists, so I'm like,
Right.
I'm aware that it's there. I just don't know enough about it to speak about it eloquently.
Yeah. All right. So I would like to mention before we move on from Finding Nemo, I would like to mention Finding Nemo was actually Pixar's first time winning the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature.
But didn't Best Animated Feature like just come out when they did that? Wasn't that like as like a little? We need to create a Pixar award for whenever Pixar releases a movie, then we'll give them an Academy Award because we don't want to take away from a live action film.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The
Did I get it
first
right?
close. The
Okay.
first animated feature, the first Academy Award for animated feature, actually was in 2001, which is when Monsters Inc. came out. Monsters Inc. was nominated for Best Animated Feature, as well as Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, but the winner was Shrek.
Huh.
Shrek won the first award for Best Animated Feature over Monsters Inc.
Well, Shrek has basically become some kind of strange, ironic religion for a bunch of people,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I've had people try to explain this to me. I'm like, what is this whole thing of like Shrek is life and whatever? I'm trying to get this figured
Yeah.
out. Like, what's going on with this? Uh, and
That's a
yeah,
discussion for another day, but
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think certainly I'm not surprised. I'm sure that I knew that when it happened, but it's been a long time, and I have not been paying close attention to the Oscars in a while. But with the Academy voters, who, especially back then, but I believe it's still true to this day, they skew much older,
Mm,
right? And if you're looking at Shrek, then Shrek is a much more recognizable story for what people who have been in the industry for a long time would recognize as being a that's a good picture, you know?
right.
Those types of
Yeah.
people where they grew up watching films from the 40s and 50s and 60s and and then it's like you look at Monsters Inc. and you're like, I don't even know what to do with this, but Shrek it's a fairy tale, but it's kind of a facetious fairy tale, and you've got
Right.
human characters, and the comedy is not really problematic. It's not troubling in any way because like the
Right.
comedy within Monsters Inc. is it's just like all these monsters are going to die unless they like figure out some way. Like it's an energy crisis, and then they're
Yes,
terrified
yeah.
of children, and then it's like they're sneaking into like kids' rooms at the end of it and trying to make them laugh. And you're like, wait, these are our heroes. They're sneaking into children's rooms and this.
Yeah. Yeah, I do more or less think of the first animated feature uh Academy Award being more or less it wasn't they weren't quite sure what to do with it yet. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of why it went to Shrek. Because then like the following year, Spirited Away by Hayao
Oh,
Miyazaki won.
yeah.
Um, and then it became Finding Nemo up against Brother Bear and the Triplets of Belleville, which I don't even know what that is. But
It's a
I mean, even
French film.
yeah, but even Brother Bear is a very you know mature, very mature film in its themes, and
Yeah.
I don't- so yeah, so it is kind of interesting just to see that compared to the first year where it was Monsters Inc. versus Jimmy Neutron, which is very uh, not as mature,
Right.
and Shrek. So yeah. Anyway, that is a discussion for another day. But I just thought that it was worth pointing out that you
No,
know
that I appreciate that. Okay, so we've got. Oh man, I
The
left the
Incredibles
page. Okay, thank
is
you.
yes. The Incredibles is I've heard some people refer to it as the best superhero film. This was, many years ago before the advent of the MCU and such,
Sure.
but it's still much better than the vast majority of MCU films, and it's certainly the best version of the Fantastic Four that we've seen.
That is true. That is true. Um, yeah, I feel like, and certainly The Incredibles has got its fans who will sing its praises until time no longer exists. And
Right.
uh, I mean, I don't have an issue with it. I don't think it's spectacular. I think it's good,
Hmm.
but I I'm far more impressed by everything that Pixar has done up until that point. I find that it's just in part because, and I think my issue with The Incredibles is this a good Pixar film or is this just a good film? Does it need to even
Hmm.
be animated?
That is an interesting point.
Because
Uh,
I don't know about these other movies if they could have been done both because of technology and in part because of story. I feel
hmm.
like computer animation is the way to tell those other stories. You don't want to get caught up in weird special effects with like Toy Story or with Monsters Inc. with like the costumes. Like you don't want to get carried away by that because the
Right.
themes and
And
the
and
story are so important.
yeah, and even, 2D animation would be incredibly prohibitive for something like Monsters Inc., where you have to get the
Yes,
characters the exact same every single frame. Um,
exactly. But I think
yeah.
that's really where I'm at with The Incredibles is I'm just like it's a good film and The Incredibles 2 is a good film, but it just feels like I'm watching an animated version of a regular MCU film.
Hmm.
I mean
Yeah.
that's just how I feel. Um,
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. The reasons why I love The Incredibles have nothing to do with the animation, and if it were done live action, then I'm sure it would be, you know,
I agree.
yeah,
I,
the
I
the
I
same
like
stuff.
I like The Incredibles. Like, don't get me
Hmm.
wrong. This is what I'm saying. Is I like The Incredibles, but I don't think that I like The Incredibles as a Pixar film. I
Right.
think I just like The Incredibles because I think it's a good movie that could have been live action, and I think it would have been
Yeah.
just as good, or at least pretty
Yeah.
close to being just as good.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, having said that, I mean, some of the powers would be difficult to do with the technology of that time.
Yeah, I agree. Of that time, but
Yeah.
I think that you look at it now and you're
Hmm.
like, well, couldn't you make this film completely as a live action film and essentially have the same effect? That if you
Yeah.
took people, like if you, let's say, this would be a very strange, a very costly experiment, but I am pretty sure that if you completely remade The Incredibles as a live action film and then you keep the original and then you take somebody who has not seen either one, is not familiar, and like, or you take two different groups, right, and you show them one and you show them the other and then you switch it, then people will be like, yeah, it's basically the same, it's just as good either way. But I don't think that would happen with any other Pixar film up until this point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I would say is The Incredibles being an animated film, computer animated film, but just animated film in general, is it does sort of have more of a comic book feel to it. Um, Compared to the live action films. I think that there is a certain level of,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm watching, a Saturday morning cartoon
Okay.
uh, uh, or it just resembles more of the um,
Yeah, because
sort
animation
of like,
and the superhero genre obviously are have got this long history of with cartoon versions of superheroes, right? Because
yeah,
there's comic book art and then there's the animation art of the different, you know, shows that were adapted to television like, Spider-Man in the 60s, and
right,
I'm sure
yep,
there's stuff well before that, but that's the one that I really think of as being kind of classic superhero animation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I also like I love the fact that The Incredibles takes place in this this sort of timeless place
Yeah,
where you're not really quite sure what era they're in. Like you get
yeah,
some elements of like 50s,
sure.
design and culture, mixed with, all this modern technology and everything. This anachronistic, approach to it,
Yeah.
which I think is, yeah, interesting, but
I think it's great as well. I still think you can do that in live action.
yeah, yeah, no, I agree.
So I just
So
think in a Pixar
putting
discussion, but that's all that I'm trying to say though, is that within
mm,
a Pixar discussion, then trying to analyze or evaluate this film in its place within Pixar, then I just did this help Pixar? Did this expand what they do? Or is this an aberration?
I mean, it is interesting because it was almost entirely led by Brad Bird, who I believe previously had not worked with had not been a part of Pixar at all, but he was the sole screenwriter and director for the film compared to every other film, which has had numerous writers, different directors. Um, yeah, so it is interesting how Brad Bird just sort of stepped in and said, "Okay, I'm gonna, create this film," and Pixar was like, "Okay, yeah, here's, our animation stuff, so that you can do it." Um,
Right.
yeah, so I definitely think that there is something to that, and yeah, uh, I
It's
do have to say I love the story. I love the film. I love the approach of like all the family dynamics I think are brilliantly done. And especially you know well, I mean, honestly, everything, with the siblings fighting with each other but ultimately looking out for each other, with the wife being understandably suspicious of the husband, and the husband sort of trying to relive the glory days without letting his wife know. Uh, there's a lot there that's very mature, all put into a child-friendly package, and that's sort of what Pixar is known for.
Yeah, but I feel like Pixar also in storytelling as well as in technology is has they're trailblazers. And
Mm,
with this, I feel like this is just such well-worn road with the plot, with the themes, with all of those things that you just mentioned. It's so much of it just feels paint by numbers to me that you
mm,
just wind it up and you just let this film go. That I watched it and I've watched it multiple times, and I just feel like there's no surprises within the film,
mm.
right? That
Yeah,
within Finding Nemo, then like it's such a bewildering experience at first, and you're just trying to make sense of the world. Or Monsters Inc., you're trying to make sense of the world. You're trying to figure out the
yeah,
dynamics within this world. And same thing with Toy Story. Then you're watching Toy Story, and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, like what are the rules and how does this work that the toys are alive and can they let people see them be alive and you know like
right.
all
Yeah.
and so it's like it's compelling but you watch the Incredibles and you're just like, oh, okay, you're playing with this well-established genre and you're doing
Yeah.
like fairly fun things. It's fairly facetious, and if you know the superhero genre well, then you catch all the like there. It's an act of playfulness throughout the film, um,
Mhm.
but again, it's not bad. I don't think that it's bad. I don't I feel like I wish Pixar didn't make that because I wish we
Right.
got a different Pixar film instead of The Incredibles. I wish
Mhm.
The Incredibles still existed, but it was
Right.
just not done by them because it's like that's a lot of resources that they devoted to this film and now to a second film and
Yeah.
that we were, to me, denied a Pixar film, a real Pixar film. Like I look
Mhm.
at, and I know that like this is jumping way ahead, but something like Coco, like, come
Yeah.
on, if we could have had another film like that instead of The Incredibles, I would make that trade every single day. right? Because you look at
Yeah.
that, and that movie is just it. What else is similar to it, right? Show
Yeah.
me the comp. Show me what the comp is on Coco, But it's
Right.
like, show me what the comp is on The Incredibles, and it's like you could develop some pretty good comparisons there
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
to a lot of other things. So you could say The Incredibles does a better job, and I'm like, it
Right.
does.
Yes.
It does do a better job than most superhero films that are covering the same kind of ground, even if they're taking a facetious approach. But it's
Mhm.
not really what Pixar, to me, is really good at.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. That's a really good point. It, The Incredibles essentially takes the the label that the Fantastic Four had as, the first family of
Right.
superheroes, and does a literal interpretation of it, throwing in all those family dynamics. It is still a film that could have been done by DreamWorks or,
Yes.
you know,
And I think
um,
DreamWorks would have been a good choice for it.
yeah, yeah,
DreamWorks has done some good movies, and I think that The Incredibles
yeah.
would fit more within within their catalog than fitting in with Pixar.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, especially since, as we've mentioned, like all the other Pixar films up to this point all featured non-human characters.
Exactly. But
So yeah,
DreamWorks doesn't seem to have an issue with having human characters.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
I feel better now though, because I have had this issue with The Incredibles, and I've been trying to work it out, and it's only in talking to you like just now that I've been able to work it out. And I'm like, because I don't hate the film. I don't think it's bad. But
Right.
there's something that I'm like, "Ugh, I don't know what it is," and I'm like, that's it. It's that I feel like we got denied a real Pixar film for several years because everything went towards that.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Oh, was your
all
dinner
right.
ready?
Apparently. Yes, that was my smoke detector going off. But moving on. So the next film that Pixar came out with was Cars. Um, I am not a huge fan of this film.
And I'll try to defend it because I really like Cars, but I know that you don't. Okay, I want to hear what is it, because I know that you've briefly talked to me about it before. But what's your issue with the movie?
Uh, Basically, it's a lot of the same things that you were just describing with The Incredibles, but uh, approaching it more from the animated side, where this film could have been done by Disney, by some other uh, 2D animation studio or
Yeah,
3D animation studio,
sure.
and it would have been the same thing. And Cars doesn't feel like something that really digs down deep and approaches, a lot of the mature themes that I've come to expect from Pixar.
Hmm.
Where you do have, Lightning McQueen being like, yeah, I'm a fast car. Oh, maybe I need to slow down every once in a while. But that's not, nearly the same as, many of the themes that we've talked about with other films. And it's also, Cars is a completely separate world. And
Yes.
prior to that, then all the Pixar films had more or less taken place in the real world. The Incredibles being a little bit of an exception, but I still saw it as, like, oh yeah, it's superheroes who exist in a world of regular people.
Okay.
Um,
Yes.
but with Cars, and it's just like, yeah, no, this is a completely different world, and I, the logic of the world just makes absolutely no sense to me. It feels like a half-baked, idea of like, are cars born? Do they age? Do they like I don't understand a single thing about how this world functions. Like they need gas, but do they also need food because they have mouths? Like I don't understand, and I
Do
know
they
that a
have to
lot of
brush
people
their teeth?
right. They have door handles. Why? There's nobody who would
There's no.
be
This is like the funniest thing. I love this so much.
like
Questioning
I'm
the
not the
internal
only
law.
person who's pointed out these issues, but it is something that like I picked up on all those years ago when I first saw Cars, and I'm just like, I don't get it. Like It just doesn't feel like a Pixar film.
Right. I have the same issue with Harry Potter. Like, just like get me started on all of the questions I have about the physics of the Harry Potter universe. And like, there's just so much that I'm just like, let's really think about this though. You're telling me. And so, yeah, definitely within Cars, as soon as you start questioning those things, the entire thing just unravels because it is just like, I don't even know,
Yeah, I mean it's
an
it's a thing.
inexplicable world.
Yeah, it does seem like something that would be made by, by Disney or, by virtually any other animation studio because it feels like, oh yeah, this is a fun kids film about cars that live in a Cars world and they just drive around and do different things. Like there's nothing to me that says like, yes, this is the full world building that I've come to expect from Pixar. I feel like every single step was just, oh, we're not going to explain that. Oh, or, we don't need to explain that. So,
Right.
yeah,
Okay. Can I give my little defense of Cars?
for sure.
Okay, so the themes that I see in this, I see them being pretty heavy themes. And the film is taking on, okay, listen, you have been born and raised in an expanding city, right? The biggest city in Canada.
Mhm.
You've always lived there. And the world is very, very different outside of large urban centers. And the transition from a mostly rural population into a mostly urban population that we have seen at this demographic shift over the last really like 60 to 80 years. I think it's been most pronounced. But definitely over the last century, then it's been going on. But it's somewhere within the last, I think, like I can't remember exactly when, but there's been this shift of there are more people living in urban centers, large urban centers, than living outside in small communities. And that comes at a cost that there is a history that not only gets uh, lost, in some ways it gets destroyed. I mean, neighborhoods that got destroyed by freeways going through, and what this did to small communities across America where so many have been, have effectively become ghost towns where they've been decimated and seemingly with no one looking back and saying, with all of this progress, maybe we've also lost something and we need to have an appreciation for what we've lost. And to me, that is such a North American attitude that you don't get in other parts of the world. At least as far as I can tell, you don't have that as much. Like if you go to Europe, they didn't tear down the historic parts of their cities because their cities are so much older. They didn't tear it down to say, well, we now have cars, so the entire thing
Right.
needs to change. Instead, the cars of Europe, in many ways, because so many of them are much, much smaller, are designed to be able to get through very narrow roads that were never designed for cars.
Man, you are giving me the idea for a much better sequel to Cars than what
Okay.
we got. But
I don't. I'm not going to defend the sequel or sequels. Um,
yeah, well, we'll get to those. But
right. Yeah, I'm not defending that, but so I think it's basically saying it's a melancholy film, and there's melancholy throughout the film, both in the town itself that is struggling to survive and the people who desperately care about it, but they feel like the entire world has forgotten about them, and the world really has, all in the name of progress. And we just champion progress, and we see, like we say, like, look at how much better things are, and I can get this product, so much faster, and I can travel from one place to another so much faster. And it's like, okay, well, objectively, you do have, you're going to get cheaper products and you're going to get more variety and all of that as a result of that. But there is a cost. And this film is effectively saying, like, grabbing your head and saying, but look at what you lost as a result of the
right.
freeway that you're on. And that also, the old timey character, it's been a while since I've seen it, but the old timey car where he was this champion, and
Doc
then,
Hudson.
yeah, Doc Hudson, is that it? Doc? Okay, so Doc Hudson, and it's like you think about, and there's so many stories of this, of somebody who was a celebrity and then they get forgotten. And tying those two things together of these forgotten towns of America with this forgotten person, where it's like in its heyday, it was really something, but it's saying, but let's look at it when it's not its heyday. Let's look at the end of it, or at least the twilight years of this town, of this person. And I love that theme so much. And I feel like Hollywood does a really good job of looking at that theme, the old grizzled gunslinger, or like the old detective where it's like one more case, I've got to do one more job, right?
Yeah.
Where right in their twilight, and and to me, what's great about Pixar doing this is Pixar, I think, effectively killed the tradition of 2D animation with
Right.
actual artists. And this film is basically saying, yeah, we did that. But, and even though there's so much that's superior in what we can do with animation, in terms of just the level of detail that we can achieve and what that opens up in storytelling. But at the same time, we are, because everything shifted over here, something got lost over here.
Right.
And that melancholy focus of, in some ways, nostalgia for what we've lost, and then saying, but you can't go back, like you can't undo this. I really like that theme. And that to me is where it is actually a fairly mature theme within the film.
Right. Yeah, I do see that, and I think that you phrased that, beautifully. I mean, the film is very upfront about, this the concept of, the freeway paving the way to the future, and forgetting about these, small towns, about these rural communities that are, that made their lives off of tourists
Absolutely,
and
because
all that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like just like kind of a little like brief history of it. I mean, like, because and this is why I brought up the fact that of where you have always lived, and it's that I also grew up in Toronto, but then I moved out of Toronto, and then I've
Mhm.
lived in small communities because I've always had an affection for these communities where it's like their best days are kind of behind them, and I'm like, that doesn't have to be the case, and like
Right.
we
Yeah.
can revitalize, and I love small communities so much.
Mm.
And when I drive through places like that, then my heart just wants to see a revitalization come to that town. But like, I mean, for instance, like where I lived in Ontario is a small Ontario town,
Mhm.
but the wealth was really there when the train stopped there. But then the
Yeah.
train no longer stopped there as freeways came about, because
Right.
people used to travel by train a lot more, and the trains would stop in all of these small little towns had train stations, and then the
Right.
trains just stopped, stopping. They stopped having stations in all these little communities, and then you get the freeway, and the freeway just comes through and people just blow past the town, and
Yeah.
you get all these nice historic buildings where you're like, wow, how did this town ever have this much wealth? And it's like, oh, it's because the train used to stop here. Now it just blows right past us. Um, and even here, in Florida, where I am now, then I drive up to this town where I'm teaching. And I mean, I was trying to do it today. I was trying to count how many commercial buildings are vacant. And when you're driving in, it is more than occupied, like literally.
Wow.
You're just looking at this, and it's because of the I-75. Because the I-75, basically within Florida, you've got, the 95 and the I-75 that kind of go down both sides of the state. But before you had that, then you have the highway that I drive on, which is the 19/98. And the train goes right beside it. And you
Mm.
can tell that at one point, this town was really, really booming because everybody who came to Florida from this side drove right through it. And
Right.
now no one drives through the town anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's effectively abandoned. And So it's just, and I mean, like everybody in anywhere except for the big urban centers in America or in Canada can point to this. Anybody who lives
Right.
outside of them will have the same story. And
Yeah.
so I like the fact that it's exploring that story. I don't know as like a story for kids how well that works, but I'm saying as an adult, then I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, uh I think that it does still have a lot of, the themes that we have come to expect from Pixar, um, as you've laid out. And I think it is, honestly, it is the world building that is lost on me, that
Right.
that I just feel like
And I
it's
think that's
so.
fair.
Yeah, it just does not work for me because I cannot buy into the world.
Yeah.
I can take away those themes, and I love those themes. I really do. I love that it does explore that. Um, but it's hard for me to grasp this, story when I'm just constantly asking
Right.
questions.
No, I hear
Like that's
you.
just the mind that I have, where I'm
I
just like, wait, but how does this work? How does that work? Like,
I hear you.
it's called planes, or it's called cars, and then you've got planes, which, so wait, what other vehicles are there? And then you've got the bugs are also
Have they done a
like,
boats version?
I don't
Boats.
know. Are there boats in
Submarine.
this? I don't know. Are there sailboats compared to motorboats? Are there rowboats? I don't know.
What happened before cars existed? Cars have only been around for a short period of time. What came before the first car?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it raises
You are
so many
gonna,
questions.
if you bring this up with a little kid, I guarantee you they're gonna start crying by the end of this. They're just gonna have some existential breakdown.
Yeah, no, it's just, oh my goodness. I have so many questions for this world, and the film is interested in answering none of them.
That's
Um,
true. It really is interested in answering none of those questions.
yeah. I mean, you even have, like, at the one point when you have the two minivans who are coming through the town, and they get scared, and you hear the of the car alarm. I'm like, what? What are they
Who's breaking in?
gonna happen to them? I don't. Are they going to be broken into, or is that some kind of other protection? I don't get it.
This is so funny. Oh goodness, I love this. Um,
I could talk about cars all day just because I have so many questions.
okay, I wanted to, because as we were talking here, then I'm like, okay, but, and you're 100% correct on that. Like, I'm not going to dispute any of those issues. Um, but the themes that I was pointing out, they I want your opinion on this, but don't you think they pair so well, or they dovetail so well with the themes in Coco? Because the themes in Coco, and I think what I love about that is our ancestors, where we came from, how do we treat the elderly, right?
Yeah.
That to me is like what, like with Coco, where you look at this and it's like, how do we treat our uh, these, you know, patriarchs or matriarchs within our family, where they can't even really take care of themselves, and they might not even be that present anymore. You know, they're just kind of somewhere else most of the time. And it's like, but they weren't always like that. And do we just ignore them, or do we treat them like they've got something of value, and something, like, literally, like, I mean, you can't even put a price on what they have to offer in terms of family history, and even if they're limited in their abilities at this point, right? That affection, that attention to the old woman in Coco, and that is the really the uh, I guess it'd be more the denouement of the film than the climax. Like, it's more of the falling action, but it is the moment where everyone is going to be moved at the end of it. Um,
Mm.
and I just think, like, with Cars, I think that was kind of their first attempt to explore those themes, and that
Right.
it does come back. So I feel like there's some justification, like, for it being within the Pixar universe, but definitely not the cars themselves or the physics or all of those things that you're
Yeah.
pointing out. because
Yeah.
those things are really they're so funny to me now.
There's so many. Oh my goodness. There's there's
How
the
does any of this work?
there's the tattoo that the one car has, like the oh my goodness, the tramp stamp essentially. And I'm just like, what is going on here? Like like Nick McQueen specifically says, "Oh, is that a little pinstripe tattoo I see there?" And she's like, "Oh, you saw that?" And I'm like, what is happening?
This is so good. Oh my goodness. I feel like I need somebody like John Mulaney, the stand-up comedian, to just go over this entire thing. What
Yeah.
he did with Back to the Future. I need
Right.
that, but for cars.
Yes, yes. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. You could do like a 20-minute bit on that, and I'd be with you the whole way.
Sounds good.
Um,
All right.
I'm thinking, okay, where are we at within the universe? So I just want
We've
to
done
see.
7 out of the 20 so films. So do you want to quickly talk about Ratatouille, Wall-E, and Up, or do you want to do like 7, 7, and 6? Wait, does that work? Yeah.
Well,
Um,
but we're not going to really get into the Toy Story films, and some of these I'm not going to have as much to say about because, like, I'll be honest. Let me just quickly, just for your own sake, I haven't seen Toy Story 4. I have
mhm.
seen The Incredibles 2 and Coco. I've not seen Cars 3. I have seen Finding Dory, but I've not seen The Good Dinosaur.
Oh,
I've
okay. Yeah.
I've seen Inside Out, Monsters University. I've seen, but it's been a while. Brave. I've seen Cars 2. I've seen Toy Story 3. I think I've seen, but I haven't seen Up. So
Okay.
uh, there's, like I say, I was on a roll if I had seen every single Pixar film up until a certain point, and then once they started getting into sequels, and I'm like, I think I'm going to start skipping some of these.
Yeah, yeah, no, that is understandable. And
So
yeah, Pixar does have a rule, or they did state at one point that they were planning on doing one original film a year and one sequel every other year, so that they would be releasing 1.5 films per year. Um, but they've changed their mind on that, and now they say they have no plans for any future sequels. So,
okay,
which is good. Um,
yeah, that is good. Um, I mean, like the Toy Story sequels, I think have been great, but aside from that,
mhm. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Toy Story 4.
right? But I haven't
But 2
seen
and
it.
3 are incredible. So,
Yeah. Um,
uh,
but let's talk because I think Wally is such an interesting film. At the very least, let's talk Ratatouille, and
yeah,
then we might end it there, and then we'll do a
okay,
second podcast on the rest of them.
yeah, that's fine.
So, okay, so Ratatouille, this is another Brad Bird film, right?
Mhm.
That he did The Incredibles. That was his first one,
Yes.
and then
Now, this one, then he did work with 2 other screenwriters. So it's not uh, an entirely solo effort. I mean, no film is a solo effort, but
right,
in as much as it can be than The Incredibles was compared to this one, which does have a little bit more collaboration.
right. Um, so Ratatouille, is this? I mean, you had The Incredibles, and then this, where you've got human characters in this, but now you've got this animal that's interacting with a person,
Right.
and um, I don't know. I don't know about your thoughts on Ratatouille. I enjoyed it. I thought that it was a good movie. I don't necessarily know that it, again, like, is it a good Pixar movie? Like,
Yeah, I have similar thoughts, and it's a lot of it is it, I'm trying to figure out like how to say it, but it is when it first came out, or when it was first like announced, all the trailers came out, all that. I had no interest in this film, and it's not that I was like, "Oh, that looks stupid." It was just literally I had no
yeah,
interest in
it's
the
just
film.
disinterest. You don't
Yeah,
have
I was
strong
like,
feelings at all.
I don't know. It's a film with rats and cooking. I'm not
Right.
interested in either of those things.
Exactly.
Um, so it did not appeal to me at all. Even still, then it's, you know, um, it's a very enjoyable film. I think that it does tackle, a lot of really interesting themes. Um, but yeah, I do agree that it's not one of Pixar's best, in my opinion.
Right. I'm trying to remember because I think I've seen it once, and yeah, I'm sure I've only seen it the one time, and it was probably pretty close to when it came out. So, correct me if I'm wrong here, but is it that the chef, like the chef, he can't cook, but the rat can, and nobody wants the rat in the kitchen, so then they have this agreement that he'll be like up here under the guy's chef hat?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm trying to think about that idea and the significance, essentially, of that.
I
Because,
mean, it has to do with the themes that run through it, like the Gusteau, who was the previous incredibly successful chef, a brilliant chef. Then uh, he often said like anyone can cook, and it's like anyone can learn to cook, all that, and then to have this character Linguini, who is the main chef, the main character, then uh, he can't cook at all. He has terrible instincts,
mhm,
and you find out over the course of the film that he is actually the direct descendant, like the son of Gusteau,
mhm,
uh, this unknown heir. Um, and meanwhile, you've got Remy, the rat, who, I mean, who would ever think that a rat could be a good chef? So it's like playing with preconceptions,
sure.
and all that, where the rat watched Gusto's shows and was like, oh, anybody can be a chef. Okay, then I can be a chef. And it's his journey of like trying to prove himself, trying to prove that like, yeah, I can, be a great chef if somebody would just give me a chance. But everybody looks at me and just sees a rat. And then you've got Linguini, who is a bit of a klutz and everything. And
Mhm.
yeah, anyway, I think that it does. And I haven't, analyzed it or watched it for analysis, but
Yeah, I, I'm starting to get a thought on this, and my thought essentially is that yeah, this isn't very important. It's not. It's no, I mean, because my issue with it, where it's like you get this combination of animals and people in there, I'm like, well, I mean, there have been plenty of incredible films and certainly literature that deal with this in a much more important way of
Mhm.
because somebody is a different race or gender or because of their family background or social class, whatever else, that it's like you guys just see this, but I'm really more than this, and you guys need to get over yourselves. But I mean,
Yeah.
at least for me with Ratatouille, then I'm like, legitimately, I don't want a rodent in the kitchen. I don't
Yes.
care what he can do. So I'm like,
Right.
I like your issues with Cars has kind of been my thing, like with Ratatouille, where I'm like, oh, it's got some funny parts. I like the part where I forget, I think it's the one rat character who talks like, or maybe it's Remy who's like, haven't you noticed that like if you don't like wash your paws or whatever, everything like tastes like where you walked,
Right.
right? Like I
Yeah.
liked that joke, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's some funny stuff in it. But as far as these, like important themes, then I'm like, well, I mean, if you guys are really going to talk about like there is no difference between us, and I'm like, but there is a difference between people and rats.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there isn't a difference between like in terms of the like not to erase important cultural or linguistic or whatever differences, but basically it's like every human being is just as valuable as any other human being, regardless of your ethnicity or race or gender or anything like age, right? Then it's like we can all agree with that, and that's a good
Yeah.
message for children to learn at a young age. But as far as a rat can be in the kitchen.
Right. And
I don't know. I'm missing something. I know I'm missing something here.
yeah, I think that one of the biggest facets of this theme is criticism, and you do have the main food critic who, you know, who had like kind of caused the initial chef to go on um, a bit of a downward slope. Eventually leading to his death, but I don't know, how much of that is explored because again, it has been a little while and I haven't really carefully watched the film. Uh, but then, this food critic is toward the end when he tastes this food from this supposed master chef, then uh, then he's taken back to his childhood.
Mm,
And so then it's this idea of like, oh wow, okay, clearly this chef is incredibly skilled. I have to meet him. And then he gets introduced to this rat, and he's like, no, there's no way that this rat did that. So I think it's more uh, more about that, more about the idea that a critic would never even consider something by this type of artist
right.
as chefs are seen, um, uh, just simply based on please they can't make this kind of
Right.
they can't make that kind of food, um, and then them sort of being having to second guess that is interesting, but I do think that you're right. Like there are, in terms of the simple nature of everyone should be treated equally and we should let go of our, preconceptions or our prejudices, then yeah, there are other films that do that much better.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
there really are. There's so many.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of criticism, right, and the
Hmm.
relationship between artists and critics is a really interesting theme for me in particular. Like,
Right.
I mean, as a writer and as somebody who's now experiencing critics looking at my work, and
Right.
that's a whole
And
thing.
yeah, I know that you have had, some criticism over your first novel, Orphans of Liberty, being about a character who has a different, religion and ethnicity than you. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, because that's the thing. I'm thinking through it with Ratatouille, and I'm like, it's almost like it's making an argument that would be that the political left, the far political left, would seriously um, hate, which is
right,
it's almost like because like there has been issues, and I've heard this in the last like few years of people saying, well, it's if you're not of that ethnicity but you're cooking that food, then it's cultural appropriation.
right.
And the distinction between appropriation and appreciation, right? And it's like, well,
Hmm.
is it cultural appropriation? Am I just appropriating it, stripping of it of its history and removing the entire culture and just giving you the finished product and I don't even care about it? Or is it saying, I'm going to learn everything I can, even though I'm not from there, but it's out
Right.
of an appreciation for it, and I'm going to give you the whole complexity to it. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, there's a lot of people saying that, like that is a whole thing of, oh, well, you're not Mexican, therefore you can't open up a Mexican restaurant, or you're not Chinese, you can't open up a Chinese restaurant. And I mean, I do want people to think about that because like that is a real thing. And I think we often think of it like that, where we go, oh, yeah, if somebody is making traditional Chinese cuisine, but they're, white or they're black or they're from the Middle East, so you might
Yeah.
go, really? Like,
Right.
but then at the same time, then you'd say, okay, well, how did you learn all of this stuff? And you would probably get a really interesting story.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um,
So maybe the film's doing some interesting stuff there.
yeah, I do think that it is, and I do think that I need to, rewatch it, being more analytical,
Yeah.
to sort of pick apart some of those things because I do think that there is something about, you know, Remy the rat being unwanted in the kitchen, even though he would be such a good help, such a good addition
Yeah.
to the restaurant, and it just being like, no, this isn't your place. So
It
yeah.
feels like just such a shallow and like a shallow metaphor for race relations.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, but there's so many films that have done this so much better.
Yeah, yeah. No, I definitely agree, and I
Yeah.
think that it is again not one of my favorite Pixar
Yeah.
films.
Yeah.
It's good,
Yeah.
but it's
I don't have an issue with it. I don't think that it's bad. Like I really don't dislike the film. It's just it
Mhm.
doesn't work for me as well as the others. And I think that's
Yeah,
kind of part of the issue when you're evaluating Pixar films is
yeah.
they've raised the bar so high that when
Yes.
they don't meet the Pixar standard, then
Yes.
we can kind of like get a little critical of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is yeah, that's my issue with Cars. I think that if any other studio had done it, I'd say, wow, this is an incredible animated film. But
Right.
because it's a Pixar film, then I look at it and I go, oh, is that all?
Right. Exactly. We had a little bit of a technical issue there, and so my camera just stopped working. Anyway, so there's a little bit of a cut in the video. But basically, I think like where we're both at is that Pixar is now a victim of its own success in that when you evaluate a Pixar film, you look at it and then you say, it's not even a question of is it good? It's is it Pixar good? And
Yes.
it seems like kind of an unfair way of judging these movies
Yeah.
because I mean they're so much better than most stuff that gets produced. I mean, if you think about like the amount of things that get produced, how many direct to DVD movies there have been, junk on like channel 700, like
Right.
just terrible,
Yeah.
terrible stuff. It's like Pixar is better than 99% of anything that's ever getting produced.
Yeah.
With that being said, within that 1%, however, there is a range.
Yes.
There
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. With Cars 2 being all the way at the bottom.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but yes, no, I agree entirely. Ranking Pixar films, I mean, it ultimately doesn't matter. It's a Pixar film, which means that it's great.
Yeah, and I guess the point here is that even when there are elements of the film that are not working, like, and I agree with you about Cars. I think there's stuff that just doesn't really work and doesn't really make sense. And I think with Ratatouille, there's stuff that doesn't work and doesn't really make sense. But even when they've got those elements that are not working, there's so much that is working that I feel like that it's hard not to just give it up for Pixar, to praise them and to just say like, wow, even when you guys miss in different elements of a film, you still are getting so much right that it's hard to dislike this.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm I'm really curious about how the Academy views these films. We should wrap this up, but Finding Nemo won, as we said, the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. The Incredibles won. Cars did not. Ratatouille did. And then Wally did, and then Up
Well, of
did.
course, Ratatouille won because it had to do with critics. And it was
Right.
literally like the Academy of Arts and
Yeah.
Sciences. It's a bunch of film critics who are looking at this thing, or film theorists, or people in the industry. And it's like, of course they care. Like, that is a surefire way. Just make a movie about Hollywood, make a movie about producers or screenwriters, make a movie about critics, and you're going to get nominated.
Right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry,
Uh,
keep going though. Keep going.
uh, yeah, no, I just think that it's really interesting how, there are some Pixar films that don't make it, and I wonder if that don't win, for that year, and I wonder how much of that is because, critics are looking at them and saying, oh, well, it's not Pixar's best. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's I do think that is something that Pixar has to be, struggling with, um, for a number of years. Then I don't I believe that a number of their films have not even been nominated for best feature film, and I feel like
Hmm.
that's, you know, are they better than the other films that are being nominated? I would say for the most part, yes, but they're not being considered because it's like, well, I mean, come on, Pixar, you can do something better than this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because I'm just very briefly just going through the ones that we have looked at already, and I mean, I think that Monsters Inc. is a better film than Shrek.
Absolutely.
I'm not a big Shrek fan. I haven't even seen most like the other ones and I've only seen 80% of Shrek. It doesn't keep my interest at all. Um, but then yeah, okay, in 2002, it doesn't look like Pixar had one, right?
No.
And then
Uh,
in 2003, Finding Nemo won. 2004, The Incredibles won. They didn't have one nominated in 2005. 2006, Happy Feet won over
mhm.
Cars and Monster House. Have you seen Monster House?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I've seen that thing twice. I like that movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'll have
I
to
like
check it out.
horror, so
Right.
it's kind of playing with that, like with the haunted house, and so,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
But yeah, I mean,
Ratatouille won, and so that's kind of brings us up to where we're at with this.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, as you go on, then I think that there are more cases of Pixar films being overlooked because oh, well,
Well,
it's not Pixar's best. Monsters
yeah,
University
yeah.
was not nominated. Not even nominated. um, Inside Out won. The Good Dinosaur was that. No, it was not even nominated, which is that is a shame because I love that film more than most. Finding Dory, uh, not nominated. Um, Cars 3, uh, not nominated. Um, Coco, yeah, it won.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
if that didn't win, that would just be a tragedy, or a
Yeah,
travesty.
and then The Incredibles 2 was nominated but did not win. Which makes sense. But yeah, so it is interesting how I feel like there is a little bit of that as a general mindset. Then, even when you hear bad bad things about a Pixar film, then you're still like, well, it's still Pixar, so it's got to be good.
Right.
I would say that Brave is one of the perfect examples of that. I feel like a lot of people don't like Brave. Critics were not the keenest on it, but I think that it's a very good film. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, we will get
Yeah.
into that one.
Well, yeah, that's right. We'll get into all those and we'll do a second podcast on that, and it'll be Pixar Part 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Starting with Up, which I encourage you to watch before.
If I can find it, then I'll figure out a way to watch it.
At the
Um,
very least, watch like the first 5 minutes or
I've
10 minutes.
seen the first 5 minutes.
Okay.
I've seen moments from it.
Gotcha.
I just have not seen the entire thing. In part because yeah, you watch like that first like sequence, and then you're just like, well, I'm devastated. I'm
Yeah.
done. I already get it. It's brilliant, okay? And it's like I don't want to feel the things that I'm feeling. I've had
Right.
enough. And I'm like this whole
Yes.
thing of like redeeming the grumpy old man and kind of getting like why he is that way. And I'm like, oh,
It,
believe me, I don't need to go on that journey. I've already done it in my head.
it does get more fun as the film goes on.
Okay. Okay, because it just felt so relentless of
No,
just
it gets
like
much
your
more
heart and
fun.
just "Ah!"
Yeah. Yeah, no, all right. But yeah, a lot of good things about Pixar, but there are still criticisms for, I think we've said criticisms about every single film.
Yeah. Isn't the next one that we're talking about Wally?
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah,
My
that yeah.
apologies. Yeah.
Because Wally, I've got lots to say, and that's why I'm like, I don't
Yes.
want to get started on it
Right.
until the next podcast. All right, folks, feel free to comment below and just talk about what you think, favorite Pixar films from what we've talked about, what's working.
Please answer some of those questions about
Some
cars.
of those questions about cars, please. And
Ask more questions.
absolutely. And this is just a small little plea that I will make that I very seldom do on the podcast, but please share this with friends and whoever else. Share it on social media, especially if you are enjoying this, because it would be great if the channel could grow a little bit more and we could get more viewers. If you have noticed, we have not been able to post a lot recently, and that's because we're not making anything from this, and I'm having to go out and make a living, and Tyler's having to go out and make a living, and the podcast is suffering because of our day jobs, and I don't want a day job anymore. So I think we're a long way away from ever making anything from this, but any success would be great. So if you are enjoying this, please don't keep it to yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a rare moment of me being earnest about the actual channel, which I don't know.
Yeah.
I've only done it once or twice before.
Yeah, I think that is important, though. I mean, especially if you are, fans of film, and I mean, if you're watching this, then you surely are.
Presumably. Yeah.
But if you are in the film community at all on Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is, share it on there. Because if you're enjoying these discussions, I'm sure many other people would.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it's in part the reason why I haven't asked about it before is we've managed to have time every week to get one out. It was from November until early July. Then we did not miss a week. We were late by a day or two occasionally, but we didn't miss a week. And now we have missed a lot of weeks. I did do an update on this channel about the career change that I've been going through and trying to start in on a new writing project and a bunch of other things. And Tyler, you've had a bunch of stuff going on as well with work and your own YouTube channel that you do separate from this. And it's one of those things of like, I don't like the fact that we haven't been able to do this. And it would, at the very least for me, even if there was no monetary compensation, it would at least justify it a lot more if I felt like, there is, like, it's growing and it has been growing, but it would be nice if it picked up the pace of growth a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, we would surely do this even if no one was watching, but it certainly helps to motivate us. If we do feel like, oh yeah, there are people who are loving this, who are really taking
tolerating it. I'll just go with tolerating.
Yes, but if you are getting anything out of this podcast, then that does mean a lot to us. And
it does. It really does. So feel free to comment below, like, share, and subscribe and all of that stuff, because I never say that, but I'm saying it now. So thanks so much for watching, folks, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Ignore the bell, people. We're gonna keep going. We're still ignoring it. Don't worry. I don't know what that. I think that's the fire drill. All right. We're gonna go home. Yeah, all right, we're done.